They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you.
Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I'm joined by the hostess of the amazing podcast, The House That Screams, Candy Allison. Candy, how you doing today?
Doing well. It's hot, but otherwise great.
I feel you. I feel like I'm sitting at a dinner table screaming while other people are hitting me with a hammer. Totally understand the heat right now here in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's muggy. So if it's not raining, you're sweating and melting right now.
Yes, I completely agree. And we're not too far away from each other. I don't want to give away location, but we are both here in the Midwest and sweating profusely. So for those of you that don't know, Candy is also an author, a punk rock enthusiast with an emphasis on horror punk. Totally got you. Grew up total punk rock kid. Also, she has her own horror themed makeup line, does work with some cosmetic companies on the side. And The House That Screams also has a side cast, Ghouls Night Out, which is fucking brilliant, where the ladies of the show do an honest feminist horror review episodes. So for the people that don't know, what can you tell us a little bit about not only The House That Screams, but about Ghouls Night Out?
Ghouls Night Out is interesting. That in a second. I guess I'll start at the beginning. It was born out of I had this back injury, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I don't feel like writing for once in my life. So what do I love? I love horror. So started the podcast, but I'm very, got that punk rock mentality. And I'm like, I want to do something that's not being done. I am a very honest, in your face kind of person. And I found some like-minded individuals, and we don't have any rules. Like if you listen to our show, it's fucking chaos, and I love it. We don't filter. It's hilarious. Sometimes we veer off topic. It's just a lot of people, and this is what I mostly get from our fans, is that they feel like when they put the show on, it's relaxing, it's funny, and they feel like they walked into like a group of friends drinking, smoking, having a good time, talking about horror movies. Like it sounds very genuine, and it is, because we are all very dear friends. So yeah. And then Ghouls Night Out was born of, there's only two females on the show, myself and the podcast sister, Erica, who is also my partner in the makeup company. If I Don't Grow Cosmetics US, by the way. But we decided we're both feminists, and we wanted to do some horror films that had some themes. And it was going to be a one-off because we were very impressed with The Love Witch. Like I did cosplay as The Love Witch last year. I was obsessed. And so we were going to do a one-off, but it just exploded. Like Anna Biller liked it, the director, the actors, everybody involved with it. And people were so impressed that we've done, I Spit on Your Grave, which, we get really deep in these topics. So people are like, oh my God, Ghouls Night Out. Some people specifically just like Ghouls Night Out only. And it's just as no rules, unfiltered as the rest of the show, but it's just more in depth between Erica and I.
And that's why it was so awesome for me when I reached out to you and you got back to me so quickly, because obviously I'm a fan of the podcast as well. And for those of you that haven't listened to the podcast and would also like to follow Candy or the podcast, I have all the social media links and the podcast link right down here in the description. So make sure you're giving that a listen, not only for The House That Screams, but also for Ghouls Night Out. These ladies are awesome. The House That Screams is fantastic. So I put that on while I'm at work with an earbud, and I listen as I'm just working. So these ladies help get me through the day. Now, before we get started on the reason that we're here, with this podcast down here, like I said, I want everybody clicking down here on these. Is there anything else that you'd like me to put down here in the description that these people can follow and check out?
We are the biggest horror podcast, not popularity-wise, although we have just blown up the last 2 seasons, and just everything is huge right now, like to the point where I'm like, oh my God. But never expected that. But there's 7 of us. So it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of differing opinions. Every once in a while we get those rare, everybody gives it a 10. And we have some fun things that we do every show that it's probably the only consistency. We start off every one of the shows with a quote from the film. Each one of us, like, I'll be the final girl, I'll pick a quote from the film and say it, and then we all do it. Like when we did Return of the Living Dead, like my husband and I acted out the scene between Spider and Trash before she takes off her clothes. Like we just do crazy stuff, and then we do ratings. Like, so let's use Return of the Living Dead. Like I could be like 10 out of 10, send more paramedics, So we do a lot of really fun stuff with every episode. You have a good time. Even when you listen to Brain Damage, which we called our after school special, where I get really personal on the show. So there was a lot of seriousness to it, but we all still had a really good time, and we still ended up laughing later on. You know, you're gonna laugh.
Yeah, that's what makes the world go round. So we know what you're doing right now with the podcast, and obviously with the future, some health things that are going on that I really don't want to get too specific about. But you are continuing the podcast in the future. But now, Candy, I want to take you back to the past, and I want to talk about what got you started in the horror genre that we all know and love so much. Talk about your first horror movie, and your first horror movie was
Night of the Living Dead. It's official.
She approves it, man. She's back here watching. She was making sure
I had
you
to
were
wear
going
my limited edition Fright Rags George T.
I love the George T. I love Fright Rags.
I do have love for Dawn of the Dead, so I had to bring Flyboy with me, but he's just kind of chilling there.
Ben from Fright Rags actually was a guest on the podcast at one point, and he is one of
love that episode.
He's such a nice, kind guy, and he's so easy to get along with, and Fright Rags is so great. For those of you that don't, I don't want to pimp Fright Rags too much, but check them out. If you're a horror fan, a horror enthusiast, you will love their clothing. You'll love what they do over at Fright Rags. So, Night of the Living Dead. How old were you the first time, Candy, would you say you were when you watched this?
7. Now, my mother is such a big horror fan, particularly when I was younger. She was a young mom. You know, she was 17 when she had me. So this is showing my age a little bit here, but you know, this is about 1986, 87. I had to be 86 because it was summer. Yeah. So yeah, my mom knew that I was interested in Twilight Zone, and there was a local horror host here called Sammy Terry. He has since passed, but his son's taken over, and they do like Facebook Live events. If you want to do some Midwest horror hosts, check out Sammy Terry. Scared the shit out of me as a kid, but it made me interested. So she's like, no, so the movie that you have to watch, so it was my first official, I'm going to pay attention, was Night of the Living Dead. And what a great start. And I think your first movie really influences your tastes in horror.
Well, mine was House. And to this day, I fucking adore that film. It's one of my favorites to this day. And I do want to clarify for everybody watching, obviously she said this was 86, 87. So this is the black and white George Romero, not the Tom Savini color version.
Which I do love, though.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, we talked about how obviously you were with your mom the first time you've seen this, but this is a film that has been influential to so many people for so many different reasons. A lot of people say this started the zombie craze. You could compare this to what the vampires were at one point. That's what this was directly taken from. But in this movie that is filled with scenes that are still being bit on today, no pun intended, what would you say the scene that affected you the most was from Night of the Living Dead?
Well, I really have 2 major ones, but for the purpose of this discussion, I chose a moment that really struck me at the time, which was in particular when, you know, we have our main, at the beginning, we start off with Barbara and Johnny going to put the wreath on the grave. And so you can tell that as brother and sister, they're very close. And throughout the film, you know, Barbara goes catatonic, you know, and I think that would actually happen a lot. If the real zombie apocalypse happened, people would be losing their minds. They think they'd be badasses. Everybody thinks they'd be a badass. The shotgun out there. No, there'd be a lot more catatonia and shit like that.
Dude, I want to move out when I see a fucking spider. What do you think's going to happen when a horde of zombies is
fucking
coming
burn
at
it,
me,
buy a new house.
I'd be more like Sophia than Daryl. I'm just throwing that out there. I'd be the little girl that's been a deadite in the barn the whole time. Or not a deadite, a zombie. I'm sorry. Evil Dead on the brain.
Yeah, deadite, don't get me started. My son's name is Ash.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my kids both have horror names. But so when the part where we really kind of see Barbara come more to herself, and it's brief, is when we have this great entrance. It's beautifully shot. The zombies are getting in. And we see Johnny's driving gloves. Bam, you see that glove hit the door. And then there's zombie Johnny. And Barbara's kind of like, oh, fuck, all together. Barbara's completely back, but not for long because zombie got her. You know, zombie Johnny came back and got her.
Right.
So, when I was doing acting, I used to do Barbara's monologue before she kind of, you know, Ben knocks her out. I used to do that whole monologue. That was my favorite monologue to do. But that's a lot. That's the most dialogue and the most backstory we really get here in this.
Sure.
So I mean a lot to me, and that's what I love about Romero because he makes you care.
Mm-hmm.
I cared when Johnny showed up, and it fucked me up because especially as a kid, I'm like, oh my god, like that's really, oh my god,
And it's funny because we obviously watch Johnny die at the beginning at the cemetery in the worst death scene ever in any horror movie. Like
it's not great.
It's not, but it does the job. It's effective.
And it's the movie lets you forgive that.
Right. So what would you say? Because Night of the Living Dead, again, this is a movie that is so influential to everybody in the horror genre. Whether you watched the George Romero one or the Tom Savini one first, it's very influential. But from the George Romero one, when someone brings up Night of the Living Dead, say me, you, and Candy, we're just sitting there having some beer, hanging out, and I'm like, hey, Night of the Living Dead. What's the first thing that pops in your head, Candy, when I just say Night of the Living Dead?
Bleak. It is the bleakest. And to this day, I have to say, upholds that bleakest fucking ending ever.
It's in my top 3 darkest endings of all time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the ending is so, I get goosebumps every time because I watch that end credit scene where it's still photographs, but the sound is real time with meat hooks and you see him on the pile. And I'm like, no, he made it. No, but he didn't. And
right.
And we can tack on social commentary. There's so much you can do with this.
Well, when you see, like you said, you see Ben and he's safe, and then he just gets shot, and you're just so heartbroken. And to me, like I said,
words. Another one for
the pile. And for me, like I said, this is top 3 for me. You got this, you have The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist, and then American Werewolf in London are the 3 darkest horror endings, and I fucking love all 3 of those movies. They're so great. The world doesn't always end with sunshine and rainbows and happiness. There's a lot of times where shit ends bleak as fuck. So we talked about, Candy, which scene affected you the most, and we talked about what you think about when you think of Night of the Living Dead. But now I want to know, what would you say your favorite scene from Night of the Living Dead is?
Oh gosh, there's so many. But I think, if I'm just going off that 7-year-old girl that I was, when the fucking truck explodes.
Yes.
And that look on Ben's face where he's looking back at this explosion and looking at all the zombies between him and the house. And I just panicked. I'm like, it was just so good at putting me in that moment. Like you knew that this movie was not afraid to go there now. Like,
right.
Fucking buckle up because that shit just happened. How is he going to get back to the house? What are we going to do? You're involved in this movie. So that explosion where you're like, fuck.
See, and that actually brings me into my next question, because we're going to go dark here for a second. We talk about your favorite scene and which scene affected you the most. Now, being horror fans, something that we're all about, any horror fan, the kills. The kills. That's what we fucking love. We adore it. We go for the kills. What is your favorite kill in Night of the Living Dead?
So that scene, and it's immortalized here on the Romero T. We see the gardening trowel right here.
Yep.
Now, what it is about that particular death, because we have some just really dramatic deaths in this. Everyone hits you, but is that she didn't bite her. She didn't eat her. It was a deliberate stabbing her to death. And I mean, it was so shocking at the time, all the buzz about it, it's has matricide in it and whatever, but people weren't even thinking, well, she got her with a gardening trowel, but isn't that a little odd for a zombie? They're usually just eating because you notice like they're biting, they're eating, but she doesn't get eaten. She gets stabbed to death by her daughter with a trowel.
This movie is something I always go back to, and it's that scene. And there's another scene where a zombie picks up a rock and breaks the car window.
Yeah.
When people talk about, oh, zombies can't do this, zombies can't do that. I'm like, dude, in Night of the Living Dead, one stabs somebody and the other picks up a fucking rock and breaks the window to get to somebody. There was never this set in stone, zombies can't do this. They're not just brains.
Well, I hate when people say the brains thing, because that's Return of the Living Dead. And I'm like, you've got your sagas mixed up, because No, they don't. They don't speak. They never were going for brains. They just wanted to eat your entire body.
Right.
So people get that confused, not really knowing their horror history, and that's one of those things. Like people, like between Frankenstein's monster and Frankenstein, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those things for me. I'm
Well,
like,
it just irritates me when someone says a zombie can't do that. A zombie can't run.
bearing
I'm like,
zombies.
well, I'm just saying, like, who the fuck are you? Like, zombie Hitler? Like, who the fuck are you to say what zombies
Let's
can
see
and can't
your
do?
zombie movie. You know what I'm saying?
Use imagination and have fun. That's what zombies are. They're there for you to be able to use your imagination and have fun with them. Like, look at Day of the Dead. They teach one of them how to have emotion.
Bub.
Like,
Bub is iconic in the house.
Yes.
Fucking love Bub.
So, I get people that get shit, oh, zombies can't run, so I hate those movies. Like, dude, fuck you. Like,
calm down a little bit.
Man.
Well, we just recently, because of course we originally had done my favorite, Dawn of the Dead. So we had to do the remake, and my husband was in the camp of the zombies can't run. I'm like, look, I saw the movie in the theater. I had a fucking good time. I had great moments. Is it my favorite film ever? No, but it's a very popular episode of ours. People love that movie. I'm like, you're not. If you're gonna sit and dissect everything, like, you're not in this for fun, are you? Like,
right.
Of course, I like the trivia and to just add to my repertoire, but no, I don't want to dissect everything. And if you're making me think about that while I'm watching the film, you're not doing a very good job in your film. And when I watched that, I didn't mind the running zombies. Like, who fucking cares? Great movie.
And one of the scariest parts of that movie is the one-arm zombie. When he starts running to the door, like, that's
just like, holy shit, they can run, and game over, man, game over.
And then, like, it's funny because we talk about what zombies can and can't do, and it's one of those things where I'm a little harder on remakes, because if you're going to try to, do something that's already been done, blow me away. Child's Play did that. Evil Dead 2013 did that. Dawn of the Dead did that.
I really like the reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Jessica Biel in it. What's weird is, like, you're the first person I've met who doesn't agree with me on that one. But
look,
it's different for everybody, and I don't judge. I don't judge.
Yeah, to me, Texas Chainsaw Remake is just, it's all right. Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't love it. I think they did a lot of good with it, but, confession time, I absolutely love Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2. I love those films.
Well, who doesn't?
After that, I don't like any of them, really, after that. I think that Texas Chainsaw is one of the worst horror franchises that there is. And like I said, that sucks, because 1 and 2 are so great, but the rest are either just god-awful or, it's all right, I guess.
I did like the reboot, just because I thought when you do a reboot, you have to pay homage and respect to the original film. This is my criteria, but also add something to it. And I felt like it went that extra mile. Like, I really love the original TCM, but you don't really actually see too much. And I think the reboot, they did a good job at showing what we didn't see. But, like, I disagree with you on the Child's Play thing, but it doesn't matter. And this is one of the great things about horror fandom. Everybody's really accepting, and hey, agree to disagree. But with remakes, we did try to start a renaissance. And I think it worked, because it's our most downloaded episode, which would be the Tom Savini remake of Night of the Living Dead. It's our most listened to episode, and I'm so proud of that. For, God, a year and a half now, people still listen to the episode.
That was my next question. You're in a room, and you have to choose Tom Savini or George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Which one are you choosing?
Well, of course, George's, but I love Savini, and a lot of people fight with me on Savini. Every time I've met the man, and it's been many times, I have a famous picture. Like, we have Candy's awkward celebrity encounters moments on our show. It's a little side thing we do. Like, every time I meet people, it's awkward. But first time I met Savini, I hockey checked my husband out of the picture. You can see him in the back, so I could be next to him. Tom wasn't very nice to me, but I understand that he's gruff and he's a dick, and I know that. But he's always been nice to me. But with Tom Savini's remake, and I'm a big fan, like the eyelash glue that my company makes is called Smoke and Mirrors. If you're a Savini fan, you know what that means. But when Savini did this, Romero wrote the script. He had his hand in there, and he There were some things that he wanted to update from the original film. So George actually wrote that. And a lot of people don't know that George was there helping out Tom.
Right.
So it still has George involved, and there's just a lot of trivia, a lot of knowledge to that. So definitely seek out that information. We have an episode about it. Like I said, it's great.
I don't mind Tom Savini's Night of the Living Dead until the third act. I hate the third act. I hate that Ben's a zombie. I hate that Barbara survives and she's like this badass. Like I don't know the changes in the third act.
That was George's idea. George did not like that Barbara was catatonic, but it works so well in the original film. But I think he was trying to sort of update a little bit, and that helped Tom, get a different vision out there. The film definitely doesn't deserve all the shit that it gets. If
I had seen the 93 version, I might have liked that one more than I did the original. But because I seen the original and that ending affected me so much with watching him survive and then get shot, I think that's the reason I don't like Savini's as much. Now, again, I like the movie. I did a top 10 favorite horror remakes. That was on the list. I do enjoy that film. I just don't like the third act.
It's clunky at the third act, but and we discussed a lot of these issues with the film, and how we all kind of stood on that film. It was great to unearth it because it needed to be unearthed. And since then, Savini has released his book about the version you've never seen, all the storyboards. They cut him budgetarily, and they cut a lot of gore out, which is crazy from the master of gore. Right. At the time, like, he was the fucking king. To me, he still is the king of
sure.
But it would have been different. It would have not been so clunky. I just didn't like, and I didn't sort of like how, Barbara should have been a badass, but why did we have to kill Ben? And we talked about how Tony Todd was the only person who could even kind of step into Dwayne Jones' shoes, but no Dwayne Jones.
No.
Tony Todd
that's actually what I love about the 2013. That's what I love about the 2013 Evil Dead. There's no Ash.
Yeah, because nobody can do Ash but Bruce.
Right. Yeah. So you did mention it already, but this is a part of the podcast, so I got to do it. People that were listening, they're already going to know the answer to this. We talked about your first horror movie, but Candy, now I'm going to go scream on you here for a little bit. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
It's so hard at picking like one favorite. For years, it's always been, and you can't see my the big poster, but my signposter's in the house. I'm obsessed with Flyboy from Dawn of the Dead, which was my next film, and it's just I'm obsessed. It's my ex tattoo as well.
That's awesome.
I just got my first one last year, but I had to do Mystery Science Theater first because it's really important to me, other than horror. But Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead are tied for my favorite. Evil Dead's in there, Evil Dead 2 especially, because it's just so much. I named my son Ash, so like I said, big Evil
Dead 2 is the best, man. I love Evil Dead 2.
I love the first one. I love Army of Darkness, but I really fucking love Evil Dead 2. Like, it's just greatest.
See, it's funny because in that franchise, I think the original is the weakest one for me in the whole franchise.
For me, it's Army of Darkness, because it's more of like fan service, got the lines. We've got a really shredded Bruce Campbell, who I'm not complaining, but it's not really horror. It's
not horror at all. It's an action adventure comedy for sure.
Yeah, it's not horror, so it's my third favorite, but I still love it. Mine goes 2, 1, 3. We always argue about this with the correct order, and my husband's like 3, 1, and 3, 2, 1, and most of us are 2, 1, 3, and then some of us are 1, 2, 3. A lot of us on the show, but I think that I'm right.
See, mine goes 1, 3, remake 2.
No, the remake was a fucking blast. We saw that. I remember it was like a date night. We went to go see it in theaters, and we laughed through the whole movie because gore makes me laugh. I laugh. And if it's not like super serious fare, and I'm like Dead Alive is like, if I'm in a bad mood, I put on Dead Alive because I'm gonna laugh.
Right.
And it's supposed to be funny, but it's also super gory and just gooey. Yeah, we saw the the reboot, and I just laughed through the whole movie. And people were getting up and moving away from us. They thought we were serial killers or something.
That's awesome. So, Candy, back to Night of the Living Dead, we always end this with the same question. We're going to go to a skull count. Now, what we're doing, we're not being critics. We're not ranking Night of the Living Dead on acting, production, score, none of the above. We're ranking this movie strictly on what this movie means to you and how much it affected you. So, Night of the Living Dead, 0 skulls being the worst and 5 being the best. What would your ranking of Night of the Living Dead be? And you can use half and quarter skulls.
Oh, I'm a all or nothing, so I never do half points. I rarely. So it has to be a full 5 because for me, it scared the shit out of me. And I have this like moment, and I know it's me, just the writer and me coming out, but it's like after I watched the film, which completely fucked me up in just the best way possible. I remember going, and I remember it being summer, and I went and walked to the living room window and looked outside, like the world was going to be different because I was different now. And then I was just, obsession was born, even though like I had some, or previous to that, you know, like I had mentioned before, like, you know, some schlocky 50 stuff, which I have a fondness for, Drive-In Fair and early Twilight Zone. People argue that it's not horror. Those people can kiss my ass. It is. But yeah, and then that changed everything. Like the world, I really thought the world was different, but I realized it was me. I was different. A whole different person.
And it's funny because I've had people on here that have talked about how after they watched their first horror movie, it turned them off to horror. They didn't want to watch horror anymore. I had a guy, and he's actually a good friend of mine now. After he watched Nightmare on Elm Street the first time, he didn't sleep with sheets on his bed for a while because the Jesus Garcia rod in the jail cell affected him so bad that he didn't want to have sheets on his bed. Like he didn't watch horror movies after that for a long time. So horror can go in one of two directions. And I think the people that really adore horror, it's like doing drugs. Like you do that for the first time, and then you're constantly chasing that dragon. Yeah, like trying to get that high again.
And like I was explaining when Hereditary came out, I was explaining it because he's a late bloomer. Like my daughter got into horror. She's 21 now, but she got in pretty young. My son didn't get interested till he was about 13, and he's 14 now. So I just like, when I was talking about Hereditary with him, and I was like, it fucked me up. It was great. I was fucked up for a week. And he's like, what? And then try to explain that to people, like, that's what we're looking for. We, you know, especially like hardcore horror fans, people who do this for their livelihood, like us, always looking for a movie that's going to fuck us up like that original one did. That had that. When we close our eyes right before when we turn out the lights before bed, we're thinking about that movie. We're always,
and the pole scene in that movie, like, I'm so glad it didn't get ruined for me, because when it happened, I was just like, oh my God, no way.
Fucked me up, and it was so great. And that's why, and when people say that, horror fans get it. Now that people are like, it fucked you up, and that's great. I'm like, no, I've been looking for that. I've been waiting for that to happen because
it's like a roller, because I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I don't like roller coasters and shit.
I do.
Horror is my roller coaster, you know. And like The Conjuring 2, that did it for me too. Like The Conjuring got me. The part 2 got me really good. My anxiety was going bad throughout that movie.
I don't like jump scares for that reason. I have anxiety disorders, so it's like they play on that, and to me, I feel like they're manipulating me. You know, I want to have genuine scares, aren't necessarily jump scares, because I don't like the jump scares. So I don't like that kind of adrenaline. I like the adrenaline of just like a crazy ride. What the fuck's gonna happen next? Oh shit. You know? But not like a jumping out at me thing. I'm like, to me, it feels cheap. I'm like, I get panic attacks for free. I don't need your help.
And that's me. I do have panic attacks. I take medicine every day for anxiety.
I just did.
But I love it. Like I still love, like, I love jump scares. And I think it's because growing up with House, like you have that first jump scare of her hanging in the bedroom, and that got me so good the first time I seen it, that I think jump scares is something that I love. I love jump scares.
And I think that this speaks of exactly what we're talking about here. I mean, our first horror film sort of shapes us. I always talk about, I get called the Romero snob. I've been tapped by several people on Twitter. And so I'm going to do this. It's on hiatus at the moment because I have such a grueling schedule with The House That Screams. and I just recovered from surgery, so I had to take 2 weeks off. It pissed me off because I usually do like 2-3 shows a week. But Romero, they want me to do strictly do his whole filmography because that's kind of the, sort of the trend. People are doing like one actor and just doing like a limited series. I'm doing Romero, but it turned me into a Romero snob. And Romero films have a very special flavor. There's drama. We have good character development. We have genuine scares that mean something because we've built up a relationship with these characters. So I like the emotional payoff. I like sort of think pieces. I like things that have something to say. You know, whereas I just said, I love junk food movies, and I grew up on 80s horror, so I love exploitation and trash too. And don't get me wrong, but like at the core of me, I like something that has a good emotional payoff, something that's heavy, has maybe some social commentary, but that's a Romero snob for you.
Right.
Somebody who this was my first film and I wanted to recapture that. And we had some beautiful installments in that series, particularly the original trilogy is amazing. Land of the Dead, everybody who listens to the podcast knows how I feel about Land of the Dead. We won't talk about that. But Diary of the Dead is not real to me. But Survival of the Dead was a great movie to go out on. It wasn't his best film, but it was a great ending to the series.
Sure.
I cared,
Right. And he will be immortal to us forever,
Totally.
Yeah, George Romero he was a genius. He was ahead of his time, even with the social commentary stuff in Night of the Living Dead, which we didn't tap too much into. But I mean, you got to think about it. You had a black dude in there saving a white woman, that was not, the world wasn't ready for that.
None of the white people knew what the hell to do. He had to tell them what to do. But the beauty of that role is it never addresses the race, and that's the best way to do it. And
bingo.
Addresses it. And because it wasn't written that way, it was not written for a black character.
Mm-hmm.
So, or for a African American to portray that character. It was just written with names. And
then
so
he came in and fucking killed it. Why would you cast the best guy for it?
And that's exactly what George said. He was the best guy, and why not? And by not addressing the race and just letting things happen, it was so much more powerful than if you had taken a minute to explain it. Like, we don't need that.
Right.
It already says it just through the story and the acting. So, like, that's fucking genius.
And that's what I love about most horror movies. Like, even like if you look at Candyman.
I love Candyman. Oh my God, Tony Todd is the sweetest guy. Oh my God. So great.
And then if you look at The People Under the Stairs, like these movies have so much social commentary in them, but they don't shove it down your throat. They're a horror movie first and foremost. They're a horror movie, but they have that social commentary that you can pick up on if you pay an ounce of attention. And I love movies that are horror movie first with a big message. I don't want you to shove a message in my face.
To say,
Yeah.
And if I'm in the mood for like a party movie or some trash, I know where to find that. But we do need to have films like this. And there's this wonderful. I mean, I love Shudder. I watch just practically every Shudder. I live on Shudder. But there's a documentary on there called Horror Noir. It's a history of Black horror.
Of Black horror, yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing. And when we did the latest Ghouls Night Out episode was The Craft. And I know people have this love for it, but we flipped that shit on its head because we went from Rachel True, who, whose character was, she was supposed to have bulimia, but they used it to racism, but then they were racist to her. Like, we flipped that movie on its head. I'm like, people probably listen to that. And I warned people, I'm like, you're not gonna hear like this great, wonderful praise for this movie.
Which Craft?
The original The Craft from like 1996.
Okay. Didn't they just do a new The Craft Legacy or some bullshit?
Yeah, and
I didn't watch it.
Corrected their problem, let's just say. I recommend listening to Ghouls Night Out. Don't if you get easily offended by people ruining your teenage years, because that was my senior year in high school. But if you get people, you don't want people to ruin that for you and make you think about it, don't listen. But if you want to get a different perspective, check that episode out because it's very controversial for us. Everything we do is controversial, but we did not do what people thought we were going to do. Like, oh my God, I love The Craft. I'm like, okay.
Right.
I don't.
Especially when you go back and you watch these things. There's so many things that we talked about that, like, you go back and you watch them again and you're like, what the fuck?
Well,
Why?
when you're going with the feminist perspective, so we're looking at these things from a feminist point of view. They turned it into a woman on woman hatred film when it could have been a sisterhood film. They made the deity, which should have been a goddess if we're following Wicca, male. I mean, look, and plus the racism, there was a lot of problems there that maybe first watch, you're not going to think about that. Like, oh, Sarah's a good character. No, she's fucking garbage. She's the villain, actually. I mean, I just spoiled it, but I don't care, like, because there's still so much more in that episode that you could hear.
See, and I haven't watched that movie in so long that I would listen to it with an open mind, because I'm one of those people that when I watched it, I was like, this was all right. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't blow me away.
People are obsessed with it, and the whole reason is Fairuza Balk, and I understand because men, women, everybody, we all love her. She's wonderful in that movie, and that's the only thing that made that movie have a legacy.
Right. Well, for those of you, I want to say it again, make sure that you are subscribing down here, listening to the podcast, follow the podcast, follow her on social media. Candy is wonderful. I was so happy to be able to do this. Don't go anywhere, Candy. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, I love you so much. As always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.